Hi, I'm Mac. You are tuned in to Traders Nation. My pleasure to have with us here today Bob Schapiro. Put out some fantastic DVDs titled On the Front Lines, Doing Business in China. Bob, welcome to Traders Nation. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Kurt?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being with us here today. You know, you wrote about that in China that yes means something entirely different than it does here in the United States. Explain that to us.
Well, yes can sometimes mean yes, exactly as it does here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's people probably have more experience dealing with the Japanese, and the word for yes is hi. And, you know, it's always said emphatically, and very often it means I hear you rather than I agree with you.
Oh, so we need to really be careful, don't we, when we say yes?
Well, yeah, and in China, as opposed differently than Japan, it's a different culture than Japan.
Yeah.
In China, it is considered rude to say no directly.
Okay.
Whereas in America, it's quite the opposite. You know, give me a straight answer.
Bob, let me ask you something. If we plan as Americans, and I've worked with people that have done business in China. They've traveled to China quite often. But if somebody is not experienced in doing business with the Chinese, let alone the Chinese government, that's a whole other story in itself. Should they really get themselves involved in cultural classes and anything to bring them up to speed on how to do business with China? Is that what your DVDs would do?
Thank you for the segue. That's exactly what the DVDs would do. But all education is good. I think what we do is orient you.
Yeah.
What we promise at the beginning is not that we're going to give you all the answers.
Yeah.
But by the time you're done with us, you're going to have all the right questions.
Right. Okay. Now, here's something, you also write about this in your book, that if you receive a gift...
Well, it's on the DVDs.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. That's right. The DVDs. My apologies. Now, if you receive a gift, it actually can insult them if you reciprocate rather quickly. What's the protocol here?
Well, you know, there is no one protocol. It's multifaceted, but I can simplify it a little bit.
Okay.
In America, a business gift, if someone gives you a business gift, generally the practice is to reciprocate fairly soon with something of roughly the same value.
Okay.
You give me a bottle of scotch for Christmas, I give you a bottle of bourbon,
all right.
You know, something like that.
Sure.
In China, that's saying, I refuse to be in your debt, even for a couple of months, even a little bit. And that's kind of insulting. But think of it this way. If your brother, let's say, gave you a better-than-expected birthday present,
right,
you wouldn't rush out in a day and a half to give him something of the same value. You'd wait till his birthday.
Sure.
And that's really, you can sort of transpose that mindset to China. You will reciprocate,
yeah,
but when the appropriate time comes up and in the appropriate way. You're not going to do it real quick.
And you're going to do it with meaning, actually. It's not going to be, okay, here's a blind reciprocation of what you had done for us. There's actually going to be some sort of meaning and rhyme and reason to it, correct?
Right.
That's what you wait for.
There's a time for me to get a gift for you. It's not tomorrow. It's not just because you got it for me today.
Sure. All right. How do we deal with the Chinese, the government? And let's face it, they've got firewalls built around not only the internet, but a lot of the ways that they do business. So how can we get around all of that? What's the workaround, but doing it legally? Because let's face it, Bob, we don't want to end up in a Chinese prison, okay? So what's the best way?
You're not going to end up in a Chinese prison.
All right.
I mean, you can go over there and do the worst possible thing, and at worst you'll get deported. And by the way, if you get deported, the only people I know business people, journalists sometimes,
sure,
and you get flown back first class at no expense.
Really? All right, so they don't want to insult. Okay. They're going to deport you, but they're not going to insult you, and they're not going to put you in coach.
No, it's not your father's red china. And you mentioned firewall. I mean, there are some real easy solutions. For example, in China, you can get a VPN, virtual private network, costs you about $40 a year.
All right.
And it's the now your internet is just like being in the West.
Okay.
No websites are blocked. Your emails go through.
All right.
And the reason China looks the other way at this sort of thing, a couple reasons. One is they want Westerners to be able to do business.
Sure.
The other is that most Chinese people don't want a VPN or can't afford one.
I see.
So
all right.
They don't really care if you're sending uncensored emails back to your wife or to your business partner in Milwaukee.
Isn't there still a concern now that they're listening in, if you will? Because if I know with the hard drives there's some issues as far as hard drives missing, data missing, eavesdropping, if you will. Is there still a concern if a businessman goes over there, pays for that service? Should they still be on heightened alert, if you will, of some sort of eavesdropping?
There is business China and there is political China.
Okay.
And they do the best they can to keep them separate. Because, for one thing, they know if they don't, there will not be Western investment in China, and they want it.
They need it.
They're not as efficient. I mean, look at our own government.
Yeah. They're not efficient.
So it's
they're not efficient. I can tell you that much.
You know, be that as it may, just doing business anywhere, doing business in New York City, people should be careful sometimes what they put into emails.
Sure. Yeah. That's correct. All right, we're running out of time, but I do want to move on. Okay, so we have suppliers over there. We're doing business with somebody in China, and we run into a problem, maybe a legal problem, maybe a contractual problem. How do you resolve those in China?
Well, for example, on our Program 3 on our DVDs,
yes,
we have a specific example, a gentleman we interviewed who had the Gray Line who still has the Gray Line franchise in Beijing.
Yeah.
And when we interviewed him, his partner had just turned on him, and it made threats, so you're going to go to jail, this and that.
Sure.
Well, it turned out that he simply got a lawyer in China and won in a Chinese court, and is now expanded to Shanghai and Guangzhou, and he's doing quite well. And the Chinese partner who had been counting on, I have all these contacts, it didn't work for them.
I see. Hey, Bob, you know, I've said for years that Chinese forget about the communism part. It's just so communist. The communists run the country, but they're just thriving on capitalism, and it sounds much like U.S. capitalism in the courts and contracts, and I mean, outside of the cultural differences, very much like capitalism. Would you agree with that?
I would agree, and I'm glad you used the words "much like."
Yeah.
Basically, where people are people all over the world.
Yeah.
But cultures are different.
Right.
And Americans and Chinese people, once they get over some of the hurdles, are very compatible.
Okay. All right. Now, where can we find these DVDs at today, Bob?
The way to find these DVDs right now is a bit limited.
Okay.
The best way is to go to www.chinadoingbusiness.com.
All right, ChinaDoingBusiness.com?
ChinaDoingBusiness.com. Or you can find us on Amazon. But if you go to ChinaDoingBusiness.com, you will you can watch some webisodes and things and get a better sense of what's there.
All right, so you have some samples on your website that people can see, get a little sampling of what the DVDs contain, right?
Correct.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, now also, too, just FYI.
And there's also a CD-ROM that has a lot of... In fact, it has a product on it that sells for $149 separately from us.
Oh, nice.
Very up-to-date business almanac, which does bring home a point, which is, in America, certain information gathered by the government is public domain, and you expect what's the weight limit on this highway?
Right. Bob, we're out of time. Bob Schapiro is his name with us today, creator of these awesome DVDs, How to Do Business in China. Bob, thanks for your time today.
Kurt, thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. Bob Schapiro, by the way, is his name. We'll be right back.